And put us on. Thank you so much. We're so glad. Oh, what a great day. We went as fast as we could, Carol, so we could have time to hear your story. People are still going to trickle in, so but we want to make sure that Stephen and Dawn could be here. We talked about this months and months ago, and Carol has been working on this. So if anyone comes in who is Spanish speaking, she's going to go with Plan B. But right now, you have a full 40 minutes to tell us about your life and God's faithfulness to you. So Carol, welcome everyone, Carol Waibel.
Okay. I was born in Chicago, Illinois in 1937. My mother, Hazel Olive Soderstrom, was of Swedish-Finnish descent. My maternal grandparents were from Åland, an island off of Sweden. It now belongs to Finland, but it was once a part of Russia. Also, the family always spoke Swedish and identified as Swedish Finns. My mother was one of 8 children and the first to be born in America. My father, Walter Carlotta Shack, was of German descent and had 2 older sisters. My dad never went to high school. He began working at 13 to help support his widowed mother and his sisters. He worked for the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago for over 50 years. After their marriage, my mom was a homemaker who never drove, like her daughter, or worked outside the home. My parents had me, their only child, after 10 years of marriage. My parents attended Nebo Lutheran Church. It was started on Chicago's northwest side by Swedish immigrants. My grandparents were charter members, as were their children. I was baptized at Nebo and on the cradle roll. I started Sunday school in the nursery department. And the Christmas program, my piece was, though I am only 2, I can say to you, a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year too. So, Sunday school was where you went every Sunday until after you were confirmed. We sang songs, heard a story from the Bible, learned a Bible verse, put pennies in the birthday bank. We always liked it when the teachers put their money in for their birthday, because they always put $1, and all the kids always said, she's 100 years old. We colored pictures and received a lesson paper to take home. The highlight of each year was a Sunday school picnic held at a forest preserve or a campground. You received tickets for Sunday school attendance. These tickets were good for soda pop, hot dogs, ice cream, candy, etc. There was swimming sometimes and races always, like the sack race, egg toss, prizes for all ages. All the kids prayed it wouldn't rain that day. I attended Chicago public schools. I walked to school alone or with friends every day. I did okay in school, except for math and physical education. I was the original klutz. In my spare time, I like to read, draw, play with dolls and paper dolls. A public library branch was close enough to walk to. I'd check out as many books as were allowed. My dad gave up on me when I tried to ride a tricycle. Needless to say, I never rode a 2-wheeled bike. I did enjoy roller skating and catching fireflies. In summer, you could play outside until the streetlights came on. You never rang a friend's bell when you wanted to play with them. My friends would stand outside and holler, "Yo, Carol," and then they would come out to play. We didn't have a TV until I was about 13. We had a big old console radio we listened to most nights. My favorite was Let's Pretend on Saturday morning, and the whole family enjoyed Jack Benny, Baby Snooks, The Shadow, and many others. I always sat on the floor and cut paper dolls or drew pictures with a radio as my backrest. We finally got a black and white TV, but I remember radio fondly. Sundays after church were days for outings to Lincoln Park or Brookfield Zoo, Field Museum, Art Institute, or the Museum of Science and Industry. I was taken to the Shrine Circus, Riverview Amusement Park, Ice Follies, and to see an ice show with Sonia Henney. My dad would take me sometimes on Saturdays to see movies. He drew the line against the 15 cartoons because the kids were all hollering and throwing popcorn. My mother and I went downtown to Marshall Fields some Saturdays. We would shop and eat in the tea room, and the ride downtown was fun too, on the elevated train and the subway. I went to Foreman High School. I was in the National Honor Society, co-editor of the school newspaper, and I graduated with perfect attendance. When they announced that at the award ceremony, all the parents went, because their kid had always tried to avoid school, and I was there every day. I was a wallflower, no boyfriends, not in with the in crowd, at home on Saturdays and prom night. I was told by my mean parents I had to go to work at 16. My dad got me jobs at various banks as file clerk or page. At church, I went to Luther League every Sunday night, a time of fun and fellowship. The menu usually consisted of sloppy joes and Kool-Aid. After high school, I went to North Park College in Chicago for 2 years. North Park is now a 4-year college run by the Mission Covenant Church. The professors were excellent, and we attended chapel every day. I belong to the Lutheran Student Association. Several of my lifelong friends were also part of that group. Pat, one of those friends, and I continued our college years at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. We attended church at the campus Lutheran Center. I was in the elementary education curriculum, so I did my student teaching in Urbana. Back in Chicago, I began teaching in Chicago public schools. I taught at Moose Elementary, mostly in 2nd grade. The pupils were diverse: Southern Appalachian whites, hillbillies, Puerto Ricans, displaced persons from Central Europe. One girl's father had been a Navajo code talker, and another mother was a gypsy. They were sweet kids who appreciated things like candy rewards or a trip to the zoo, where they had never been, even though they lived in Chicago. Many screamed when they saw the animals. I also went back to teaching Sunday school in the primary department. Once the assistant pastor came to visit us and asked, who came at Christmas? All the kids hollered Santa Claus, and all the teachers tried to hide. At the same time, my friend Janice and I started volunteering at the YMCA USO as hostesses. We registered guests, served snacks, and danced with servicemen. One Saturday night, I met this tall, thin, cute sailor named Shorty from Philadelphia. I told him he was too tall to be called Shorty, so I called him by his real name, Frank. He asked what I was doing on Sunday, and I said primly, I am teaching Sunday school. He was also Lutheran, but I never thought I'd see him again. Coming into church from the Sunday school room, there he sat with my parents. We saw each other often. My mother enjoyed feeding him as he was so thin. Her rallying cry was, have some more mashed potatoes. We became good friends, and I even met his mother when she visited him at Great Lakes. But I had another boyfriend at the time, and Frank was 5 years younger than myself. Sailors get deployed to other places, so we only heard from each other a few times in 3 years. My friend Janice and I took a trip to Williamsburg, Virginia in 1964. Frank was on a submarine stationed in Norfolk, which wasn't too far away. Janice and I were at the Williamsburg Inn, and he said he'd meet me there. When he finally got off the boat, we met and he proposed. I called my parents, and they were surprised. We wanted to be married in 2 months. Frank wanted me to go to Philly to visit his parents, which I did. Imagine sharing a bed with a future mother-in-law I'd only met once before. We were married on October 10th, 1964 at Nebo Lutheran Church in Chicago. The reception was in the church basement, followed by another reception a month later in Philadelphia. We also moved to Philly. I taught about 6 months in the Philadelphia public schools. Frank had trouble being out of the Navy and finding a suitable job. He decided to go back in the Navy and go to Electrician's B School at Great Lakes. We bought a 10-foot wide trailer to live in there so we could also take it with us wherever he was transferred to in the US. After B School, he was assigned to submarine base Point Loma, and we were off to San Diego. Someone told us Chula Vista was the nicest place to live around here. We drove our old Pontiac without air conditioning across country. I was pregnant with our daughter, Dawn, so we had a bit of a problem finding a place to park our trailer. Adults-only trailer parks don't take children, even unborn ones. We finally ended up at a family park on 100 Woodlawn next to Feaster School. Frank was assigned to the USS Sea Fox, which was deployed in Vietnam waters as soon as we arrived. When Dawn was ready to be born, I took a taxi to the old Chula Vista Community Hospital on F Street. My parents came from Chicago to help me the next day. Being submerged, Frank didn't find out Dawn was born for 2 months. I brought her to the Admiral Kidd Pier when her daddy finally returned. The Sea Fox went into dry dock in Hunters Point, San Francisco. Dawn and I went there too for 6 months. My parents came to visit and were less than impressed with the bare bones Quonset hut we were living in. It was a fun time, however. We got to explore San Francisco's many attractions and travel to Hearst Castle, which had recently opened. We also could sort of hear the Beatles' last concert right across the bay in Candlestick Park. Back home, we started going to St. Mark's. Dawn was baptized in Jacobson Hall as the sanctuary was not completed yet. Frank was deployed again on the Sea Fox. I took Dawn back to Philly to show her grandparents, Grace and Frank Sr., their granddaughter. Frank Sr. was so proud of his granddaughter, buying her toys and fancy dresses all over the place. He also was proud of his son. He said, "He's always at the laying of the keel, but not the launching." Ha, ha, ha. My in-laws were good people, and we all got along well. After that, I visited my parents and relatives and friends in Chicago. I was pregnant again with my son, Stephen. My parents again just missed the birth. My neighbor, Bill, took me again to Chula Vista Community. His wife, Harriet, had a baby girl 2 weeks before. A month or so later, we met Daddy Frank at the pier. Frank loved being a submarine sailor. It was his childhood dream. However, we were tired of being apart all the time. After 8 years in the Navy, he opted for a job where we could be together. He applied to the San Diego Police Department. He was in patrol, traffic, school patrol, hostage negotiator team, and child abuse. He retired after 30 years as a detective. We sold our trailer and moved into our present house on Colorado Avenue in Chula Vista. I had only lived in a trailer or apartments my whole life, so this is my one and only house. Our kids were now in Sunday school at St. Mark's. I started teaching the 3- and 4-year-olds when Stephen was that age, and I figured after him I could take any of those kids. When when my kids were in junior high, I started teaching at Chula Vista Christian School. I taught there for 30 years. I cherish the Christian teachers and families I worked with. We had many children from Tijuana whose parents wanted them to become proficient in English. Frank and I both retired in 2000. We enjoyed many trips to Stephen and family in Florida, Virginia, and South Carolina. We also visited Dawn when she lived in Chicago and Minneapolis for a while. We also visited relatives in Chicago, Texas, and Philly. We cruised to both Mexico and Alaska. We had many favorite places in the US, like New Orleans and San Francisco. After the COVID pandemic, I had various falls and other health issues. Frank took good care of me. Sadly, in 2022, a brain tumor took away many things Frank used to do. He seemed to lose everything, computer skills, using the phone, walking and driving. He lost a lot, but gained everything too. Jesus walked ever closer with him. Before, he could never cry or talk about heaven. Now, God's word and hymns touched him deeply. We cried but laughed a lot together too. With the help of the 2 Dawns, Stephen, Betty, and Jairo, our caregivers, I was able to have Frank at home until God called him. I thank God every day for Frank, the treasure God gave me, someone to love, who loved me back. Now I am cared for by my family, my friends, and my church family. I walk with Jesus every day. He knows my name and will never leave me or forsake me. As the old hymn says, all the way my Savior leads me. What have I to ask beside? And the other thing that I'd like to say is we have only one life. Too soon is past. Only what's done for Christ will last.
Thank you so much. As you can